Hello students, today we are going to learn about antifungal agents. There are various types of the commonly occurring fungal infection like Candida albicans infection in the vaginal wall or a thrush, which is again a fungal infection across tongue, and especially in diabetic patient in rainy season, the infection of fungal which takes place in between the foot digits. So these are very common fungal infection which needs to be treated. What is a general term used for fungal infection is mycosis. What are the different characteristics of mycotic infection? They are very opportunistic infection and sometimes they may be primary or may wear off, but as soon as they get a favorable environment they will reoccur. They can be two types, systemic or local. They progress very slowly but they remain across the body for a longer period. They have a longer duration and therefore longer duration of the therapy is required to be given, because even if they appear to be suppressed, as soon as they get a favorable environment they may reoccur. They are very difficult to diagnose and eradicate also, and usually the symptoms vary from cosmetic to the life threatening. So these are some of the important characteristics of a fungal infection. Let's talk about the antifungal drug. Now antifungal drugs need to be developed by exploiting the difference between a fungal cell and a human cell, because we need to understand that both the cells are eukaryotic cells and therefore they have a physiological and structural similarities. So if you have to kill fungal growth or you have to stop multiplication of fungal cell, you have to target those metabolites or physiological processes within the fungal cell which are different than that of the human cell, so that they will kill the fungal organism but will cause minimum damage or a dangerous effect to the human body. It is very difficult and to design such a drug which will target only fungi without affecting a human cell. The major aim for developing such type of a drug is to reduce side effects, but that's a big challenge. Now, which type of the infection have a increase or which are the conditions, circumstances under which occurrence of the fungal infection is more? When a patient is on the treatment of wide spectrum antibiotic like tetracycline, the chances of having fungal infection are more. When patient is undergoing any surgery or patient who are undergoing any transplantation or have undergone any transplantation of organ and are under treatment of immunosuppressant drug, due to suppression of the immunity the chances are more. Or the patient suffering from acquired immunodeficiency syndrome or HIV type of infection where the immunity gets suppressed, the chances of having fungal infection increases. Now before we start with a mechanism of actions and pharmacology of antifungal, we have to understand that the fungal cell membrane have a unique sterol known as ergosterol, which replaces the cholesterol which is found in our mammalian cell membrane. So this can be targeted to exert antifungal activity. There is a presence of sterol in the cell wall of both human as well as the fungal cell, but the type of the sterol present differs, and this difference can be targeted to inhibit cell wall to kill fungal microorganism. So if you understand the fungal cell, you will see this diagram of the cell membrane and the cell wall, and you can see that there are manoprotein layer, there are beta glucan layer, chitin layer is supported, and below which there is a phospholipid bilayer. This glucan layer has lot of cross linking which gives a sturdiness to the fungal cell wall, and this glucan is synthesized from the phospholipid bilayer of the cell membrane. So if you have to interfere with the cell wall, if we inhibit this cross linking of the glucan layer, then we can make the cell wall fragile, which will break, and that will hamper the integrity of the fungal cell or survival of the fungal cell. These glucan are synthesized by the beta glucan synthase enzyme, which is located in the cell membrane. So if we inhibit this enzyme, the glucan cross linking which is giving a sturdiness to the fungal cell will not be there, and that will lead to the fragile cell wall, and that may hamper the survival of a fungi. The another important component which is present in the cell membrane is ergosterol. Ergosterol is an essential component and it is not present in the human cell membrane. So either we can target ergosterol or we can target its production from the squalene. No doubt squalene are present in our human cell also. But in the process of conversion of squalene to ergosterol, there are many intermediate pathways which are involved. And therefore lot of enzymes are involved. And if you interfere with any such an intermediate pathway which converts squalene to the ergosterol synthesis can be inhibited, and therefore the integrity of the or there won't be a proper formation of the cell membrane, and that will again hamper the survival of the fungi. Another pathway is that we can inhibit DNA and RNA synthesis, where we can develop certain antifungal drugs which will interfere with nucleotide incorporation, will compete with those enzymes which are involved in the nucleotide incorporation, and therefore will interfere with DNA and RNA synthesis of fungi and will prevent their multiplication and can exert fungistatic action. So let's talk about antifungal drug and their classes. Depending upon which type of fungal infection they are attacking, they can be classified into the two classes, one systemic, another topical. Depending upon mode of action, whether they are inhibiting rate of multiplication of fungi, they can be termed as fungistatic, and if they are killing the fungal infection, they can be termed as fungicidal. Let us understand this classification. This is the classification where there are three classes. Here systemic means the antifungal drug which is administered systemically and is used to treat systemic infection. This include amphotericin B, azoles, flucytosine and echinocandins. The second class which are used for systemic infection, which is given systemically but it is used for mucocutaneous infection. This include griseofulvin and allylamine derivatives like terbinafine. These are the drugs which are applied topically and are used for topical mucocutaneous infections only. This include nystatin, certain topical azoles and topical allylamines. So you can see azole is a class of drug which can be used systemically against systemic infection and can be used against topically also against the topical infection. And terbinafine and allylamines, this belong to the same class, where terbinafine can be given systemically to treat mucocutaneous infection. At the same time, it can be available in a topical formulation to treat mucocutaneous infection. Let's start with the first class of the drug, systemic antifungal drug used to treat systemic infection. Amphotericin B becomes a prototype drug in this category. It is a Pauline macrolide antibiotic having a broad spectrum of the antifungal activity, and it is the most potent antifungal agent to treat systemic mycotic infections or mycosis. It is in the clinical use since 1960. It produces fungicidal action at a higher concentration and fungistatic action at a lower concentration. This is an antibiotic obtained from Streptomycus nodosum. If you look at its bioavailability, its CSF concentration is only 2 to 3% of the blood concentration. So it is majorly present in the circulation rather than in cerebrospinal fluid. Its highest concentration is found in the tissues like liver, spleen and the bone marrow. Comparatively lesser concentration is found in the kidney and lungs. Let us understand its mechanism of action. It is a Pauline. It has a macrocyclic ring having one side with several conjugated double bonds which impart a lipophilicity to the molecular structure, while the other side has number of hydroxyl functional group which imparts hydrophilicity. Due to the presence of conjugated double bond which is imparting a lipid solubility, it has a very high affinity to a lipoidal ergosterol which is present in the fungal cell wall. As a result of which, it gets inserted into a fungal cell wall, and then the several amphotericin molecules orient themselves in such a way that there is an outer hydrophobic ring and there is an inner orientation of a hydroxyl functional group which forms a hydrophilic pore. So it appears like a donut where there is a hydrophobic ring with a hydrophilic pore formed inside. These hydrophobic structure gets stabilized by the sterols which fill up the spaces between the amphotericin molecules, and therefore a permanent pores are formed across the cell wall. These micropores, they are hydrophilic because hydroxyl functional groups are oriented inside direction of the donut structure, and therefore they become hydrophilic, and hence those molecules which are hydrophilic in the nature from the fungal cell begin to leak out, like amino acid, ions and other water soluble substances, and survival of the fungal cell is questioned. It becomes very difficult for the fungal cell to survive as essential components of the cell begin to leak out through these micropores which are formed by the amphotericin B, and that leads to the death of the fungi. So if we go step by step, amphotericin binds to the fungal cell membrane, to which component? Ergosterol. After binding to the ergosterol, it orients in such a way that its hydrophilic functional group forms a pore, and a hydrophobic core of the donut shaped molecule creates a transmembrane ion channel, which leads to the alteration in the permeability of the fungal cell. It leads to the leakage of certain ions, and therefore it leads to the disturbances in the ion balance, majorly the loss of intracellular potassium, which becomes survival of the fungal cell difficult, that leads to the cell death. A very important point that here the drug binds specifically to the ergosterol, which is not found in the mammalian cell, and therefore it has a selectivity in its fungicidal action. So high affinity to the ergosterol, that doesn't mean it doesn't have affinity to other sterols, but comparatively it has a higher affinity to the fungal ergosterol. That's why it is forming a micropore across the fungal cell membrane through which the ion, amino acid and other water soluble substances move out. Permeability of the cell increases, and that ultimately leads to the death of the cell. But we cannot forget that there is a cholesterol present in the human cell wall, to which also it will have comparatively lesser degree but some affinity, because the cholesterol also resembles in its structure to the fungal ergosterol, and that may explain why amphotericin is associated with high toxicity. Regarding its uses, it is it's a treatment of nearly all life-threatening mycotic infection. It is used. It is mainly used for systemic diseases by giving as a slow IV. If it has to be used for some local mycotic infection, keratitis and corneal ulcers can be treated by instilling drops or by conjunctival irrigation. Then candiduria, urinary bladder, can be irrigated with amphotericin B. Or if there is a fungal arthritis, then the local injection at the site of the arthritis with the help of the amphotericin B can be administered. So it is mainly administered by a systemic route for systemic infection. Looking at the side effects and toxicity of the amphotericin B, we can divide them into the two classes. The side effects which are related to the infusion and those which occur due to the cumulative accumulation of the drug. Those which are infusion related usually include fever, chills, dyspnea, nausea, vomiting, fall in BP, hypertension, and sometimes there may be convulsions. Whereas cumulative toxicity is because of the deposition of the drug into a cell wall, and that usually leads to the nephrotoxicity because the drug leads to loss of potassium and magnesium. Not only that, because of the kidney toxicity, the erythropoietin levels also get altered, and that may result into decrease in RBC count, resulting into anemia. The infusion related side effects can be taken care if we pre-treat the patient with antipyretics like acetaminophen, antihistaminics or antiemetics. So this is the diagram which says that, okay, fine, the amphotericin is killing fungal cell, but at the same time if it is exposed for a longer time to the kidney, it may damage to the human kidney also. So to overcome this kidney damage, there can be liposomal forms of the amphotericin B, where amphotericin B gets incorporated into a lipid formulation so as its toxicity to the kidney will be reduced. At the same time, because it is present in the lipid bilayer, its efficacy will get increased, and because of which the higher doses are not required to be given, the dose may reduce, and therefore chances of the toxicity will also reduce. No doubt, such type of the formulations will be more expensive than ordinary formulation. This is a diagram where you can see the amphotericin molecule is incorporated into a lipid bilayer, and because of which its efficacy is increasing, and hence the effective concentration required to produce the desired effect will be less, and hence chances of the toxicity will also consequently fall down. So what are the key points? The amphotericin B is not absorbed enterally through the GIT route, and hence if it has to be treated for intestinal candidiasis, where you want to treat a local fungal infection located across the lumen, yes, it can be given orally because systemic absorption will not take place. The drug concentration which is achieved in infected skin is very low, and hence it cannot be used for superficial dermal fungal infections. Its penetration in the brain and the CSF is also poor, but during fungal meningitis, this penetration increases because of the inflammation of meninges and the loss of the tight junctions between the cell, and therefore it can be used in combination with other drugs like 5-fluorocytosine for treatment of meningitis. Now we are coming to the second drug, that is flucytosine. From the name itself, we will come to know that it is a pyrimidine anti-metabolite. It is a narrow spectrum but fungi-static drug. It is not a fungicidal drug. It is water soluble. It can be given only by the oral route. It has comparatively very poor protein binding. But if what is important is that if you look at its CSF concentration, it is 75% of the plasma, and that makes it useful for treatment of fungal meningitis. Let us understand its mechanism of action. 5-fluorocytosine outside the fungal body, it is present as a 5-fluorocytosine. There is an enzyme called as a cytosine permease enzyme which allows the permeation of this drug into a fungal cell. So once the 5-fluorocytosine enters into the fungal cell, inside the fungal cell it gets converted to 5-fluorouridine and its phosphate derivatives, and they ultimately inhibit thymidylate synthase enzyme, and therefore there won't be incorporation of the thymidine into the growing chain of the DNA. It will also hamper the RNA formation. Once the DNA and RNA formation is hampered, there cannot be the replication of the DNA, there won't be a protein synthesis, and multiplication of the fungi will be inhibited. That is how they will exert a fungistatic action. So flucytosine is taken up by the fungal cell via enzyme, as I have mentioned, cytosine permease. Inside the fungal cell, it will be converted first to 5-fluorouridine, then to the 5-fluorodeoxyuridine monophosphate, and then to the fluorouridine triphosphate, which is responsible actually to inhibit thymidylate synthetase enzyme, which will inhibit synthesis of DNA and the RNA, and will exert fungistatic effect. The question is why the drug does not act on the human cell. Yes, it doesn't act on the human cell because human cell is not able to convert 5-fluorocytosine to 5-fluorouridine, which is actually an active metabolite, and that makes the drug more selective to act against fungal cell rather than acting against human cell. If you look at the clinical uses, it is never given as a monotherapy. It is always used in adjuvant drug or combination therapy. It is combined with amphotericin B to treat cryptococcal meningitis infection, or it can also be combined with itraconazole to treat chromoblastomycosis infections. So remember that this is always used in combination. Regarding adverse effect, yes, there is a presence of the enzyme which will convert 5-fluorocytosine to 5-fluorouridine in bone marrow. where there are stem cell pluripotent cells rapidly undergoing multiplication. So the drug may get deposited into the bone marrow, may get converted to its active form and can inhibit the multiplication of the stem cells, resulting into anemia, fall in WBC count, leukopenia, fall in the platelet count, thrombocytopenia. Apart from that, it can cause GIT disturbances. It is reported to cause a mild liver dysfunctioning, but that is reversible in nature. So the key point, this is a narrow spectrum. It is fungistatic, mainly used as adjunct drug, not used as a monotherapy. Its CSF penetration is excellent and used in combination with amphotericin B to treat fungal meningitis. Now we are coming to the third important category of the drug, and that is azoles. This is the structure of azole. Azoles are further classified into two categories, imidazoles and triazoles. The first category which came into the market was obviously imidazole, ketoconazole, miconazole and clotrimazole. To overcome their side effects and adverse effects, the second category which came was a triazole, which include itraconazole, fluconazole, voriconazole and soconazole. If we look into the mechanism of action of the azoles, we find that they cause inhibition of enzyme which is located in fungi. Therefore, fungal cytochrome P450 enzyme, lanosin 14 alpha demethylase enzyme, which play a very important role in conversion of squalene to ergosterol. Because of the inhibition of this enzyme, the ergosterol synthesis is inhibited and ergosterol levels in the fungal cell wall will decrease, and that will interfere with the survival of the fungi. Now these are the various drugs: ketoconazole, itraconazole, fluconazole, voriconazole and soconazole, and these are their pharmacokinetic properties. If you look at the solubility into the water, you will find that fluconazole has and voriconazole has a highest solubility. Remaining all drugs have a low solubility, and therefore they are showing a variable absorption, whereas fluconazole and voriconazole shows a high absorption. If you compare, CSF concentration is comparatively low, almost negligible in voriconazole and soconazole, except fluconazole, where you can see there is a higher CSF concentration. If you compare the T half, you can see itraconazole has the highest T half of the 24 to 42 hours. Fluconazole also has 22 to 31 hours and soconazole has 25 hours. So these are the three drugs where frequency of administration will be less. Almost all azoles are getting metabolized by hepatic mode, except there is a fluconazole which gets eliminated through the kidney. They all are available in the oral formulation, but in addition to that, itraconazole and fluconazole can also be administered intravenously. So we can have some important points to remember. Itraconazole has a highest T half of 24 to 42 hours. Fluconazole, which gets only excreted through kidney, and fluconazole can give us a better serum CSF serum concentration ratio. Looking at the clinical uses, they are broad spectrum drug. They are mainly used for treatment of candida, cryptococcus, blastomycus, histoplasma, coccidioids and dermatophytes. So today we stop over here, and then in the next lecture we will see individual azole drugs. Thank you.